I just want to make sure it's working. Hello. Uh, I'm actually gonna record it. No, I keep what do I do? I pump faked. I was gonna make a final YouTube video. I think this is gonna be the final one. I'm actually gonna upload it on my other channel, and I think anybody that actually watches, I know it's more than just one at this point, but I don't really care about like money in the traditional sense. And I know that's kind of like what we need in order to survive in today's world. But I guess it's kind of where I'm at with all of this is I've personally noticed, not just within my own life, what the project of capital accumulation has done to my, so to speak, soul, which I haven't really done an extensive amount of time, spend amount of time writing about. I kind of just spend time writing about like tangibles, things that we can actually control if we are the person that's being considered. Irregardless, I noticed that the project of just doing something that isn't attached to money, whether that be creating or just trying to be a person, you know, you ultimately end up becoming more human in the traditional sense. Now, I know what we like to do as humans now is we like to think that just because we have more descriptors or more ways in which to measure something or more money, for instance, we are somehow getting more truth out of the transaction. And this just couldn't be further from the case. What we are ultimately doing is just entertaining different avenues of the hubris. And we really have to, in order for us as a species to graduate from this, whatever you want to call this state of lull that we're in, I think it's no mystery to the average person looking outside that society is, if it's not already dead, it's collapsing. Marx already told us what was going to happen to our society, and boy howdy is it happening. Okay, our institutions that we are, paying taxes to, are being used to attack us. Um, and I just think it's important that we at least study why that is happening on an educated and civilized basis, rather than, trying to paint the narrative once again as if this is some divine reset, or if it is, you know, the only way that we can entertain civilized life is if we put some kind of assignment of money onto something, right? And I think it just couldn't be more obvious that the world we all live in today is being eaten alive because we have decided to make it into money, right? The famous expression I like to give is, when the rivers run dry and there are no more fish left to eat, only then will the white man realize that you cannot buy everything. And just to kind of pause at the white comment, ideas around color, someone's skin color, these have nothing to do with racism. They have everything to do with someone's idea of it, certainly, but when it comes to talking about what makes someone racist, that is the inherent belief that you believe things like skin color matter more than, say, other skin colors. So when we look at, let's just talk about our own country. Let's just talk about the behaviors of, say, Israel. These nations that have essentially been occupied by foreign interests, look at just how they're behaving. You know what I'm saying? And it couldn't just be more of a tragedy of where we are today for us not to understand that money is the root of all evil. I know it's already been said, but it is as if the very ability to talk about what makes it evil is being squashed underneath the ideas of, say, for instance, the culture war. You know, again, it is not racist to say that in terms of monitoring political violence, we can track that with respect to people's skin color if we wanted to. We can also track it with respect to their beliefs and notice how these skin colors start lining up with beliefs. And again, nothing about that process was inherently racist. It's just that, and I'll get to it, as I read chapter 2, this current species of person that's walking around the Western Bloc, the United States of America, whatever this is called, it is an incredibly stupid person. And I mean that logically. We're going to get to the definitions of what stupidity is. There is before I get into my chapter 2, The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity by Carlo Cipolla. He defines the concepts that I will be using. Him and people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, they already understood where we were trending to as a species. I think it's no mystery if anyone's been following me at this point what I think what our current species actually is. But right now, it just doesn't have the moral ability to understand its own behaviors in this tax-based system that can only seek to just terrorize, you know? And I think when that is ultimately the case, when you produce a slave that doesn't have the ability to see past those chains, that is what people contemporarily defined as, the complacency of evil, if you will. That's what they're talking about. So, yeah, this will be my final video. I noticed I am just more or less liberated, not just the more I write, but the more I just decide to educate myself about what have actually happened, not just to me, with respect to my own history, but with respect to our country's history. And it's really helped me understand that in terms of, the brutal, savage nature of what each individual has with inside of them has never gone away. Um, yeah, with that, I'll get to it. Sure, it is no mystery at this point what I think of the modern person, especially if they made it past chapter 1. The reasons I cite people like Malcolm X are twofold. Firstly, as I have already stated, this person wasn't killed for what they said or did. They were murdered because of what they stood for. The guy basically acted like Jesus throughout his life, and the people murdered him just like the people in the Holy Bible murdered Jesus. Although they do not believe in the gods of Islam or Christianity, how could the people of the day, or even today, not see him for what he was? Sad is the case that it is currently within our beastly nature to continue to drop tax-based bombs on these kinds of thinkers. Secondly, I cite people like Malcolm because of what he said. He said the same things we are all basically saying and harping on today. It was someone like Malcolm that finally gave me the common sense to understand that consciousness isn't as special as any modern thinker thinks it is. We humans are brutal, savage creatures, and let his life be just another reminder of what happens when we don't put down the dogs of our society. Malcolm X's dad was a 6'3" black man from Georgia, and the surviving slaves of Georgia had to be tough in order to survive back then. Malcolm once recalled how his father could dehead rabbits and chickens with his bare hands in order to prepare them for supper. To learn how his father died and what conditions he lasted was a breathtaking experience, but it helped me understand that the modern iteration of mankind is but a pathetic whim when compared to the people that have made this country actually great. I've lifted weights almost my entire life. I will never be as physically capable as Malcolm X's father. I am surrounded by an almost godlike amount of technology, yet I will never think as freely as Malcolm. These facts about who I am and what my capabilities are help me understand how not just what constructs, help me understand how not just, I don't know what the fuck, I need to prove that. Just not what constructs myself, but what constructs the modern person. We are all enslaved to a paradigm that says who you are is directly proportional to how much money you make. These chains make up who you are and how you can behave within society. But that's how society works. There will always be chains with respect to the civilized world. It is the unfortunate reality that we all have to do to create a better world. It is the unfortunate reality that all we have to do to create a better world is to teach people which chains are worth having. Simon Dixon, an investment banker I highly suggest anyone serious study, says that he looks at atrocities like the Gazan genocide with two different sets of hats. The first hat is his financial hat. This one allows him to understand on what timescale, shape, and size the conflict takes in the Middle East. The routine nature of debt repayment through imperialism and war has led our country into a system of Western governance that seeks to do nothing but bomb brown children with tax-based dollars. The other hat is his humanitarian hat. He used to be a journalist, not just a scaly investment banker. He has effectively lived at both extremes of the money-based paradigm. The segregation that is his understanding of the humanitarian crisis around the world couldn't be more adequately understood by his hat analogy. There is a clear separation between what makes an individual human and how much money they have. And now that the rich guy told you, I hope that you have the cognitive ability to accept that and move on. Stupidity always finds a way, however. Freud understood this, just as many others did. When one begins to intertwine who they think they are with society, they ultimately split apart. And although he was a plagiarist, Freud understood these distinct separations within the psyche as the ich and the uber-ich, or the ego and the superego, respectively. I introduced these prior people and their lives to help us explain our current ones. The current Western money pig, or what is known as the modern complicit tax slave, has no idea the amount of evil it is tangled within, because it has forsaken its very cognitive ability to understand evil, because it has traded it for money. The hubris will always collapse no matter what animal it forms within, and such is the history of all fiat currencies. The pursuit of money hasn't just created people who can't see their own part in the reality they are making, but has created a society of incredibly weak and stupid people. So stupid, in fact, that even when one explains their own stupidity to them, they will instead become more willing to become upset, rather than indulging in the very ideas that might actually make them logically stupid. Most don't understand stupidity for what it is, because they refuse to emotionally engage with it, such as the curse that is not exercising ignorance with education. And wouldn't it just so happen to be the case that there are an incredible amount of stupid people roaming around on this western side of the block? These money pigs don't see how they are being farmed. They don't see how their tax dollars are actually being allocated and stolen from them. All they care about is what they think they are entitled to within their own relative understandings of this tax-based caste system. The current iteration of person that walks this western block has become incredibly weak in mind and body, mentally and physically dependent on the idea that as long as they can throw money at something, their problems will ultimately be solved. I have heard more intelligence out of grade school children in Middle Eastern YouTube shorts with respect to foreign affairs, or what is essentially our country bombing theirs, than I have out of almost any adult I can talk to today, and that truth crosses state lines for decades. The common adult walking around here right now is what Carlo Coppola defined as super stupid in his book, The Laws of Human Stupidity. The common person here doesn't have the functional capability to understand its own moral actions as it behaves in society. Society, by definition, cannot function on this principle alone. Dogs can't just keep eating kids without consequences. And boy howdy, how much more obvious could it be that it is not operating with any sense of reasonable understanding? Data centers that seek to do nothing but purge the environment of its natural resources, when we know full well the only return on investment here is to control and subjugate the future slaves being born into this hellhole. Or what is the extreme lack of accountability with respect to child sex trafficking? You would think that a functioning society would have the ability to at least imprison people quite literally responsible for human trafficking, but it would instead be the case. Excuse me, let me reread that. but it instead would be the case that it elects them to the highest positions of political power. This country is currently a safe haven for pedophiles because of money. Again, restating the exact premise of the book: the more money you have, the less humanity you have. This Western civilization is falling apart, if it wasn't dead already. Its institutions are being used to attack the very people that are paying for them, in a metaphor that can only be understood as the white blood cells attacking the wrong target, as the actual cancer takes over what remaining vital organs are left. I think it's a good last one.